Hello again, everybody. Welcome. This video is going to introduce the concept of gender and sexuality. And so basically, think about this module as broken into two sections. You have the gender aspect and the sexuality side. So basically, we're talking about sex, but in terms of kind of nature and nurture. So one half of this module is all about sex, and that's, as much as possible, we're talking about biological influences on sex. The idea that our chromosomes, our hormones, that plays an important role in, sexuality and reproduction. The reason we are here is because of sex. So of course, as animals, there's a very strong biological influence to human sexuality. But the other half, and probably almost permeating everything we talk about, to be honest, is the cultural idea. The gender side of human sexuality is the idea that society and our culture influences the way that we think about sex. And for example, when it comes to gender identity, how masculine or how feminine you feel, that is largely influenced by culture, by society. There's a social construct at work here. So take a look at this slide right here. There's actually something that gets at this right away. So of course we see kind of like the symbols of a male and female. And oftentimes those are the symbols that are used on the restroom, the sign in front of the restroom door. But what I find really fascinating is just right off the bat, we have some social influence. Namely, the female symbol is in a dress or a skirt. So there's obviously nothing inherently female about a dress, right? But our society has these norms. It's much more typical to see a female wearing a dress compared to a male. Of course, there's nothing wrong with a male wearing a dress inherently, but we have these stereotypes and these norms that essentially make these divisions, man and woman, that go far beyond biological division. So of course, what I'm trying to get at is biologically, males and females are different. There's no doubt about it. There are chromosomal differences, but our society takes those differences and exacerbates them way beyond these strict biological influences. One of the questions that sort of looms over us during this discussion in this module is, are men and women different? And again, there's going to be an obvious yes to that question, but in what ways are we different? So let's do a quick exercise. I'm going to say some adjectives, just some basic words, and I want you to think about what's the first thing that comes to mind. And what I mean by that is think about either masculine or feminine. So I'm going to say some words, immediately place them into one of those categories, masculine or feminine. All right, here we go. So the first one is dominant. Does that immediately evoke, an idea of masculine or feminine? The second, submissive, masculine or feminine. All right, how about cooperative? How about emotional? How about competitive? Or what about aggressive? All right, so there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here, but if you're like most people, you have these typical associations. So let's just talk about a couple of them. The word aggressive, most people consider that to be more of a masculine characteristic. And the word emotional, most people consider that to be a feminine characteristic. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly know both males and females that are aggressive. And I also know males and females that are emotional. So again, there's nothing inherent about a lot of the quote unquote differences that our society suggests are actually there between men and women. But it's all about social norms. And so one of the interesting questions is where do these norms come from? Where do we learn, what's appropriate for men and what's appropriate for women? And are these differences true differences, or are they simply, a social construct? Are they simply just a creation of our society? So as one final consideration, this module, it breaks apart sex and gender, sex being biologically influenced, gender being culturally and socially influenced. But nevertheless, there are a multitude of influences that bring about the thoughts and behaviors that are associated with human sexuality. So where do these thoughts and behaviors come from? We could take a number of different perspectives. So you could be, a purist and argue, for the pure biological approach. And what this would suggest is that all the differences between males and females are completely biologically driven. Men act a certain way because of their biology, women act a certain way because of their biology. Everything is because of genetics. That's just not true. We know it's not true. You're going to see plenty of information, obviously, to suggest that that's not the case. So, for example, social learning theory plays a huge role. So here's an example. I'm wearing a collared shirt right now. I feel like that is something that is culturally specific. There's nothing inherently professor about a collared shirt. I just simply wear it because, a lot of the professors that I took classes from, they wore collared shirts, I suppose. I don't really think about it, but there's probably some influence that I learned going through school, and that's probably why I tend to wear collared shirts. Of course, I don't always. I sometimes wear t-shirts. But what I'm getting at here is that in a different culture, perhaps in a tribal culture, a collared shirt for a man might be considered abnormal. So there are so many culturally specific ideas that are learned, and thus social learning theory suggests that males and females are different strictly because of cultural influence. Biology has nothing to do with it. We simply observe other people and imitate them. Now, what we've seen so far is, biology is nature, social learning theory is nurture, nature and nurture. Well, it's probably both. And I think that's what gender schema theory offers. So the word schema, it's a word we've seen a number of times this semester. It's an organized framework or an organized structure for, making our thoughts more efficient. And so what this theory suggests is that our society offers a framework with which we organize an understanding of sex and gender. In other words, within our society, women tend to behave in certain ways in terms of certain gender roles, and men tend to act or behave in other types of social roles. And this begins really early in life when we give a girl a doll for her birthday and a boy, we give him a truck or a football. What we're basically saying is that these cultural artifacts belong in separate categories. Dolls go with girls, trucks and footballs go with boys. So that's social learning theory. But the idea is that boys, very young, very early in life are aware that they're male. Basically they look down and they see that, okay, I have male parts, and females are aware that they are female, and they're aware that there's a difference between females and males. So then they look around at society and say, okay, well, there's a female and she's wearing a dress. And so if I'm a female, I should also wear a dress. Or there's a male and he's wearing a necktie, and I'm a male, so I should also be wearing a necktie. In other words, our society has these rules that are not necessarily law. Women can wear neckties, men can wear dresses, but we tend to learn these approaches based on what is typical, what's normal. All right, so without belaboring the point, this module suggests that human sexuality is influenced by a combination of nature and nurture. But put more specifically, we are going to break apart human sexuality in terms of biological influences, psychological influences, and socio-cultural influences as well. The biopsychosocial model is the only way to fully understand why humans act the way we do in terms of human sexuality.